ensuring that future communities will not be harmed by fear, silence, discrimination, or stigma. That's why we're here today. I'd like to introduce Sing Out Detroit. This is their third year graciously coming to our World AIDS Day event and performing and singing magically for us. Thank you, everyone. Sing Out Detroit is a diverse, all-gender inclusive chorus that provides a supportive environment for LGBTQ plus people and their allies to share the joy of vocal music. Their vision is to uplift and inspire others with musical performances to bring about positive social change. Throughout their 15 years of history, they have maintained 5 core values that guide them in achieving their mission and their vision: creativity, diversity, excellence, camaraderie, and significance. Thank you and welcome. Cohn? Dr. Cohn? You want me to say we or he? I think so. We. Is that right? Be sure and what I say. Okay. Okay. I want to introduce in a minute. Wait. Wow. Just thank you, everybody who's here. I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. John Cohn. Dr. John Cohn is a professor of infectious disease of Wayne State University School of Medicine. Until his recent retirement, he ran the adult HIV program at Wayne State. He has been caring for people with HIV since 1983 in San Francisco, then in New York City, Baltimore, and Detroit. He has been training healthcare teams in HIV treatment and prevention in Maryland, Michigan, and several other countries in Southern Africa. Today, we will be sharing World AIDS Day as we look backwards in time and forward. And I would like to introduce you to one of the experts, one of our providers, who is a gift to Southeast Michigan. Thank you, Dr. Cohn.
Well, I am glad and sad to be here with you today. And there are many people here that I know and have worked with for 30 years, and people I don't know who have been involved with confronting the epidemic for many decades, and every one of us could get up and speak about what they've been through and what they remember and what they're hoping for next. Janet asked me, so I'll be happy to participate, but everybody here has a lot to say and think and remember. So, as you said, it's a time to look back, a time to move forward. Oddly enough, the World Health Organization picked the theme of overcoming disruption and transforming the AIDS response. So we'll come back to that at the end of my talk. So I structured this about the years that I was involved in one way or another, and items I remember and things that were going on around me. And it's, but you didn't give me 4 hours to speak, so I'll just say a few things. And I know I'm already annoyed with the things that I leave out about so many people and so many events. So as you all know, 1981 and 1982, medical literature, MMWR, other journals started publishing about these events of opportunistic diseases, pneumocystis pneumonia, Kaposi sarcoma, in previously healthy men, young men, mostly gay men, in New York and San Francisco and Los Angeles. At that time, I was working in Southern Africa. I was in the country of Mozambique, working as an internal medicine doctor. We didn't have, the internet hadn't been invented yet, if you can remember that far back. But we also didn't have the telephone where we were, and television where we were. But we did get letters. And my friends in San Francisco wrote letters and said, this crazy thing is going on. People are getting sick. Young, healthy people are getting sick, and some are dying, and no one understands what this is about. That seemed very remote to me, 10,000 miles away at that time. And in retrospect, it worked out that there was plenty of HIV happening in Central Africa at that time, 81, 82, probably even earlier, but it hadn't come to Southern Africa yet, even though in later years, the highest rates of transmission and prevalence were in those countries in Southern Africa. But it didn't impact me very much except for knowing this in the background from my friends' letters. And then in 1983, I moved back to San Francisco, back to the hospital where I had been working. And sure enough, what my friends had written was true, and what some of you will remember was true, that young, healthy people were getting sick with things that they shouldn't have been getting ill with, illnesses that only previously occurred in people with cancer, with immunosuppression from transplant medicines, something like that. And it was mysterious and frightening. And that made for a very potent opportunity to create more stigma and discrimination. Because what was happening, what were people doing that was allowing this to occur? So it was a very bad time in many ways, but also was kind of the beginning of, or another step perhaps, in discrimination against queer people, even at the very beginning of the epidemic. So we did our best. We didn't really know what it was due to. We treated individual infections, but things kept going wrong, of course, and people didn't live that long once things started going wrong. In 1984, I moved back to New York, to Bellevue Hospital, where I spent 2 years becoming an infectious disease specialist. And gradually, during those years, a virus was discovered, first in Paris, and then in Bethesda, and then in San Francisco. It all turned out to be the same virus, and it was the cause of this epidemic, and it eventually got the name human immunodeficiency virus. Each discoverer had given it its own name, and they fought about it for quite some time until an international body chose a name that was would be applied across the world and which we still use. And as the virus was discovered, and as it was gradually realized that women could get this, infants could get it, many people could get it, it was a virus that could be transmitted, and really very quickly people understood how it was transmitted, you would think this would be the chance for fear and stigma and discrimination to decrease. Not decrease if you were about personal health, but decrease that something crazy is floating in the air to attack us. But it didn't work, right? The CDC came out with the idea of risk groups, not behaviors, but risk groups. Haitians were discriminated against because some people with HIV in New York City were from Haiti, and it became an arm of this stigma and discrimination. It was queer people, were Haitians, were people of color, were people who used drugs. Every group that had some history of discrimination in the city, this was an epidemic that amplified it. So there was the health problem, and of course then the social context in which this occurred. When the virus was discovered, within a year or so, a blood test was invented to diagnose the infection. And this was very controversial. I remember going to meetings at the New York City Health Department where activists would come with signs that said, "No test is best." They said, "This is a test for being gay. We don't want it out. This is just going to lead to more discrimination." And when they said there's really not a direct benefit from this, there's nothing to do about it if you have a positive test because there's no treatment for it, why bother? There was a lot of truth to that at that time. But it was used to screen blood donors. That was its first use, actually. And I had the job at Bellevue of telling people who got a blood transfusion in the past that their donor had come back a year or 2 or 3 later, made a donation, and tested positive. And we would tell them, we don't know if that person had this virus when you got a blood transfusion from them, but we can test you. Of course, we can't help you if you test positive, but we can tell you. So there was a way I could understand the feeling that no test is best, giving information that people didn't have a way of acting on. It's very, very uncomfortable and stressful circumstance. Then I stayed at Bellevue after my ID training and worked in what was then called the AIDS program. taking a lesson from San Francisco General Hospital and then Johns Hopkins. Other hospitals started creating inpatient programs for people hospitalized with one of the complications. And one day in 1986, one of the senior doctors came back from a meeting in Bethesda and said, "Call a meeting right away, something works." So we gathered in the auditorium and he told us about AZT. So this was October, I remember the day quite well, October 1986. And there was a drug that helped people live longer. It was a study that only ran a few months. And so the difference in survival for people that got the drug versus people who didn't was quite short in that study. Once they saw that it was working, then they gave everybody in the study the medication. Many of you will remember this drug. For some of you, it's just history, but for some of you, it was something you lived through, we lived through. It was really toxic. You had to take it every 4 hours, 2 capsules every 4 hours, day and night, with alarms going off. Many people got severe anemia. We had set up clinics. Clinics started around the country. In Bellevue, I started it, in Detroit, but everywhere that could get their hands on the medicine, clinics started to provide this. And we all had to give transfusions, like every month, to some people to keep them on this medication. And it was many years later that it was understood that the real benefit from this medicine lasted 1 year, that within about a year, the virus became resistant to it, and what was left, while many people continued to take it, because it was the only thing available, they were getting the side effects of the medicine and not the benefit. And it wasn't until 4 or 5 years later, when additional medicines had been invented and proven to be helpful, that we could sequence medications so that people could switch off something that stopped working, get something better, eventually 2 drug combinations, eventually 3 drug combinations. Steady improvement, but quite slow for people living with the virus and waiting for something better to be available to them. So during those years, the person who became the head of NIH was Anthony Fauci. He had been a person who was researching autoimmune diseases, not actually infections, but he was very successful and became the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, just as NIH was starting to fund more research about the virus, about its treatment, and so forth. And there was a person in New York, you may know the name Larry Kramer. He was one of the founders of ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And they fought in public. They fought in the newspapers. Larry Kramer called him a murderer. But they fought separately. Then they came together. And then by 1989, they were partners. A kind of a remarkable transformation, which speaks to the broad-mindedness of both of these people, that they saw that they really were both horrified by what was happening in the epidemic and felt that joining forces, they could do more than by fighting. And many things changed as a result of that partnership. So NIH, which was basically a passive entity that gave grants when people came with some clever idea, started having being proactive about funding research into the way the virus worked, the way it caused harm, what medications could be helpful, started a nationwide treatment program called the AIDS Clinical Trials Group to more rapidly develop therapies. Then with probably Kramer's influence, they also started a community-based research program, CPCRA. It was here in Detroit at Wayne State and Henry Ford. The notion that people with HIV should be part of planning studies, people with HIV should be part of designing the research agenda, became a thing, which was unheard of previously. Community advisory boards came. There's people here that I know from our community advisory boards, and probably people who participated in others. So there was this remarkable transformation that happened during those years. It's still, the development of new and effective treatments was slow, but the mechanism was transformed, and gradually improvements in care, improvements in prevention could accelerate. It still was, AZT was still the only drug for like 4 or 5 years, and some of you may remember when ACT UP went to protest at Borough's Welcome, took over their offices, complained that the medication was so expensive that people couldn't afford it. And eventually Borough's Welcome cut the price a little bit, like 20%. It still meant it was out of reach for many people, but that was the start of sort of activism with the pharmaceutical industry and trying to get them to be more responsible. We have a ways to go with that still, right? So in 1989, the year that happened with AZT, I moved to Baltimore and joined the HIV program at University of Maryland. In Baltimore, the Johns Hopkins was kind of the big institution, and also the big HIV program was at Johns Hopkins. It was run by John Bartlett, who was already a big figure in the infectious disease world. And he, like Fauci, wound up in a fight with the main activist in Baltimore, Gary Lambert. And they were replaying more or less what had happened. They were fighting in the newspaper, writing mean things about each other back and forth. In 1989, but by 1991 they were working together, became good friends, working together and promoting community input, community-based research, increasing access to therapy. So another step in this kind of remarkable transformation that had happened in probably many cities. I wasn't here at that time, so you may know more tales of how that happened in Detroit and in this area than I do. And then during those years, the 1989 to 1995, when I was in Baltimore working, gradually new classes of medicines became available. So better reverse transcriptase inhibitors and then protease inhibitors. So these were, to us at the time, remarkably powerful, but also they were remarkably awful, right? Taking 3 to 6 capsules 3 times a day with food while you had to take other medicines, chew them up when you had no food in you. So, 20 pills in a day, 5 different times a day. So on the treatment side, we could be very happy about having this to offer. And on the side of people getting therapy, this was kind of a nightmare. To participate in. But with the implementation of those drugs, the death rates in the United States from HIV, from AIDS, plummeted, dropped by 2/3 in the first year or two of having those medications available. So we looked at it as a bright side and a great advance, even though it came at great cost to the people who were using these medications at that time. So then in 1996, I moved here and started working with Skip and Clarence and Felix and others in the room, where I spent the rest of my career here. And many things happened during this time while we were here. In 1994, a study was published about using these medications during pregnancy. This was a study that was highly criticized when it was implemented. Pregnant people were offered either a placebo or pregnant people with HIV were offered either a placebo or antiretroviral therapy during pregnancy. They were tablet version. They were given intravenous medication during labor, and the infants were given 6 weeks of this medicine after birth. And people said, this is terrible, they're poisoning children, this is an abuse of pregnant people, lots of controversy. And when it finished, it turned out that the families that got the AZT had a 2/3 reduction in transmission to the infant. When I was a medical student, they said the new treatments only become instituted after the old generation of doctors die. But that's not been true here, right? In 1994, this thing was published. In 1996, across, well, resource-rich countries, high-income countries, this was the standard of care. And it meant that HIV testing was meant to be offered to everyone who became pregnant so that should they have the virus, they could take advantage of this, this implementation. It was the first proof of use of antiretrovirals to prevent infection. It was the first proof. It wasn't the first use of antiretrovirals, because in the 1990s, you know, we working in healthcare, we had accidents. You know, we got stuck by needles, we got blood splashed in our eyes, these things happened. A doctor in San Francisco got a needle stick and asked her supervisor, you know, what should I do? And the doctor said, oh, the supervising doctor said, well, there's nothing to do. And she said, well, that doesn't make sense. And she took AZT for a month and popularized this. And the same thing happened at NIH, where somebody had an injury and they said, well, there's nothing to do. But, well, there's one drug, maybe take it for 6 weeks. Maybe it will help, who knows? So it became popular to do this, and I did it at that time as well, with no proof that it would work. Healthcare workers, you know, we insist that there's proof when we want to give something to someone else, but when it comes to taking something for ourselves, we cut ourselves a little slack, right? To be honest about that, that was not, we were doing this before it was proven. But gradually there were animal models that showed that this should work, and by 1996, there were studies published that healthcare workers that took a month of AZT within a few days of a needle stick injury from someone that had the virus had an 80% lower chance of getting the virus than people who had chosen not to take it. So 076 showed medications, AZT, worked for prevention, and then the case control study of after needle sticks showed that AZT worked for prevention. And gradually, as antiretroviral treatment improved, as it went to better drugs and then 2 drugs and then 3 drug combinations, the treatment during pregnancy also went to 2 drugs and 3 drugs and better drugs and safer drugs. And the things healthcare workers took after an injury were better and better regimens. So now we say, you know, that there should be under 1% chance of an infant acquiring HIV if someone has HIV during pregnancy and uses all the medications and interventions that are available. Really, that's aiming at 0. The t-shirt says getting to 0. So treatment was getting better, prevention was getting better. Access was still hard. In the year 2000, the International AIDS Conference that was happening every year in resource-rich countries went to Durban in South Africa. It was the first time an International AIDS Conference was in a very high prevalence country. It was very strange because the president of that country didn't believe HIV caused AIDS. At the same time, that country had the highest proportion of its population with HIV than anywhere else in the world. But having the conference there was very important because it more or less said to the world, this is where people with HIV are, this is where treatment is needed. You may remember there was some US government official that had said, well, you can't use these medicines in low-income countries because people don't have a watch, they can't tell time, how can they take these medicines? It was horrifying. But by 2000, there were 2 groups that proved that these things worked. There's a group called Partners in Health that's based in Boston. You may have heard of them. They ran a project in Haiti and had great success giving antiretroviral therapy with an HIV test, a scale, and a suitcase full of pills. That was the whole technology. And in Khayelitsha, outside of Cape Town, South Africa, Doctors Without Borders ran a clinic and gave antiretroviral therapy and again proved fabulous results. And so with those two examples and highlighting the events in Southern Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, gradually resources became available. The ex-President Clinton was at that conference in 2000. He called a meeting. It was like, how could Clinton be at this meeting in Durban and call, like people were handing out flyers saying, oh, come here, Clinton, speak in this auditorium at 6 o'clock. It seemed like this couldn't be real, but we went, and the auditorium was full, and Clinton was there, and he said, I'm starting a foundation. We're going to make antiretrovirals available. Who wants it? If you're a minister of health, come speak to me after the meeting. And so the Clinton Foundation started negotiating with Indian companies to make generic antiretrovirals at a price that could go worldwide. After that, the UN started the Global Fund for HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. And perhaps out of embarrassment, then President Bush started the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, which started with 15 countries and wound up covering 50 countries with, I think, $110 billion so far in funding HIV medicines and treatment systems around the world. So it was an incredible increase from a very slow start to an impressive next steps. Other things happened. In 2010, there had been a study to see if treating STDs in Uganda would prevent people from getting HIV. There was a notion that if you had an STD, it was easier to transmit or catch HIV. It actually was true, but then this trial of treating whole neighborhoods for STDs to see if that would reduce transmission, as done in Rakai, Uganda, that study didn't work. This mass treatment didn't change HIV transmission. But something very weird and borderline ethical happened, which was in the study, people were getting blood tests every 6 months, but they weren't getting their results because the government of Uganda said we have nothing to offer them. If we give them their results, we'll just cause fear without something to do. So there was this group of people that turned out there were 400 heterosexual couples in this town where one person had HIV and one person didn't. They didn't know, but they kept getting tested every 6 months. And after the study was over and they ran all the tests, they did viral loads actually on the people who are positive. And the genius who was at Johns Hopkins noticed that everyone whose viral load was under 400, they didn't transmit to their partner. And people whose viral load, the higher the person's viral load, the more likely was the transmission. So the notion that the blood viral load was the most important marker of transmission, that was 2010. It took 9 years before there was a randomized trial where people were randomized in discordant couples in the United States, a gay couple where one person had HIV, one person didn't. In this case, they both knew. And people with HIV were healthy, so they weren't necessarily getting antivirals for their own health. And so they were randomized to take a drug to try to prevent transmission to their partner. Some of them got a placebo. If the person with HIV got sick, they got open label drug. They were treated for their own health. But while they were healthy, they were in this randomized study, and it was a dramatic effect, which you know about, where there was one transmission over 2 years among 800 couples, among people prescribed antiretroviral therapy. So that's, undetectable equals untransmittable. It started in Uganda in that observational study, and then was proven in this randomized study. So there were these incredible advances. They were slow. That was a 9-year gap, right, from the one observation to proving that this could work. But so many tools now, right? There's post-exposure prophylaxis that we talked about, started with healthcare workers. It was a lot of years before it was offered to community people, called non-occupational post-exposure prophylaxis, still underutilized. It was a lot of years before pre-exposure prophylaxis was used outside of the pregnancy circumstance, but that was proven in randomized trials, so that's a tool. Of course, the tool in pregnancy, and undetectable equals untransmittable. So there's these incredible tools that are available. And in 2019, that same Fauci, who we talked about, and a guy who had been my boss in Baltimore briefly, Robert Redfield, went to the Trump administration, this is doing Trump 1, and said, you know, we have these tools. We could stop the epidemic. And weirdly, in 2019, in his State of the Union message, Trump made an announcement of the president's campaign to end the HIV epidemic, that they were going to fund this, that they were going to aim at reducing HIV transmission 75% in 5 years and 90% in 10 years. And some of you may have been involved in some of the activities that have been funded in Detroit and Wayne County, because this was a high transmission area. He said that, right? He wanted to do that, but it's a little bit like Trump promoting funding the mRNA vaccine for COVID. He did that a few years ago, but what's happening now, right? So now we have this transition from Trump 1 to Trump 2 and all the things that are happening. So they stopped funding for mRNA vaccines. They ridicule vaccines for many things, to the extent that children are dying of measles instead of getting vaccinated. They're on a huge, as you know, anti-human rights campaign, right? Universities lose funding if they have a DEI organization. Anything that gets federal funding that promotes diversity, equality, they're having federal funding cut. It gets to the point where these crazed ideologues created crazy things, right? So I know people applied for grants that had the word diverse mountains in them, and so that was nixed because it had the word diverse in it. People that do animal research on what's called transgenic mice, they can't get funded because it has the word trans in it. So those are kind of goofy, but real important things happen too, right? We know University of Michigan has stopped its trans therapy for youth. So bad real impacts, along with kind of the ridiculous things where the ideologues don't even realize what they're doing. So that brings us to overcoming disruption and transforming the AIDS response, right? There was ACT UP, there was Gay Men's Health Crisis, there was the Black AIDS Committee. There were so many organizations and activities over 45 years to get the improvements that we have today, and they're being taken away from us. The PEPFAR that has saved millions of lives across the world was the biggest effort to control the epidemic around the world. On January 24th, they shut down funding. And then January 28th, they said maybe not. And so now the website, the federal website says, well, we're going to provide lenacapavir around the world, but we're not going to pay for anybody to transport it, to have health systems to provide it. We'll get the drug, and this is great. But then what does it mean to provide the drug when there's no system to implement it? So we have a lot to do. We have to follow in the footsteps of the people who, for the last 45 years, made campaigning for human rights, for health care, for respect, part of the movement, and we have to keep it up. It isn't over yet. So at World AIDS Day 2025, we can recognize accomplishments, and we have a lot of work left to do. Thank you.
I love listening to Dr. Cohn. I've been to so many seminars and things that he's taught being a nurse and with Association of Nurses and AIDS Care and everything. Thank you for all you've done for the community. And you know, when I was doing and putting this together and texting people and emailing people, someone, and then the news came out about how we're not supposed to be, we can't do this anymore. But we're here. And and one person, I had so many interesting comments. One comment was, and this goes to what Dr. Cohn just went over, history is erased when it's not remembered. People are erased when not remembered. And that's what somebody sent to me, and I thought, you know what? The history of where we were and where we are, and the people, where we were and where we are today. So that goes along with it. Thank you, Dr. Cohn. Where's Clarence? You want to come on up? Okay. Okay, I'm going to start out. I asked someone I know who, Jerry Burns. A lot of you probably know Jerry Burns. Nurse practitioner, worked with Dr. Cohn, to write a little introduction or something for me about Clarence. And this is what he wrote. I was honored for many years to be a health provider for Clarence Peoples. Have you heard this yet? Not yet. Oh, okay. I do hope that the health care I provided him with was beneficial to him and his health. I always looked forward to his visits because what he provided to us at the clinic was wisdom, warmth, and the model for someone living their best life and wanting everyone else to live their best life. I am excited for you, the audience there today, to be able to hear his message of spiritual growth, self-empowerment, and ultimately, love of self and others. Clarence, this is Clarence Peoples. Clarence is a motivational speaker and spiritual teacher. As someone living with HIV for over 35 years, Clarence has struggled with his sense of identity, feelings of unworthiness, and overall just feeling like damaged goods. Through an emotional journey from darkness to light, he slowly began to dismantle his old ways of thinking and began to use his life experiences to help free himself from himself. Through a process of letting go, he learned that our experience create emotions within us that we either need to cultivate or to release. For him, this meant that he needed to be able to witness his anger without getting angry, to witness his love without getting engulfed in it, and to witness the insecurities without hiding. As a result, this new level of consciousness is guiding him in setting the intention of merging spirituality and public health. And with that, I would like to introduce you to Clarence Peoples.
Testing. Awesome. I get to walk around. Hello. How you guys doing? awesome. I like to kind of move around a bit and everything or so. So thank you guys for having me this evening. My name is Clarence Peoples, and I will be talking to you guys today about two topics that are very close to my heart: HIV and spirituality. And so you'll see me doing this or so, and the top will have them advance my slides. So when I do this, so this is just to kind of signal them to the back or so. So I worked in the field for HIV for almost 20 years now, and I've been privy to conversations ranging from meeting people where they are, to psychosocial support groups, to conversations around the myriad number of services that we offer people to help them navigate life with HIV. But you know what I think is missing from the conversation? Conversations around helping people learn how to use their experiences to find healing by understanding themselves and their emotional landscape. And so the purpose of this presentation today is to start the conversation around the possibility of helping people heal HIV-related trauma through the lens of spirituality. And so I hope you find this presentation today thought-provoking, moving, informative, and inspirational. Let's begin. Next slide. Right? Next slide. There we go. HIV and stigma from darkness to light. So I'll be talking to you guys today about HIV and stigma from the standpoint of my own personal story as someone living with HIV. I'll talk about how different types of stigma can be more damaging than others, and I'll share with you how I overcame my own self-imposed stigma and the tools that I use to help me navigate the darkest times of my life. Now, I chose this particular picture because this scene represents my journey from the darkness of my own self-destructive thoughts to the light of freedom from the images that my mind created as a result of my own personalized stigma. Now, those tools I just talked about a few seconds ago, I believe are universal and can even be used to help you navigate your own life in any situation. So, sit back, relax, buckle up for this ride, and let's take this journey together. Next slide. Next slide. So stigma, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, I wanted to keep it very simple. Stigma is a mark of shame or discredit, a stain. He bore the mark of the stigma of cowardice, which is another way of saying he bore the mark of shame. So we can say that stigma is a mark of shame or discredit. Next slide. So internal stigma and external stigma. So internalized stigma, according to clinicaltrials.gov, is when a person with a mental illness basically comes to believe the negative things that their mind is telling them about themselves. Now, when I read that, I was thinking, that's pretty strong. What would make internalized stigma a mental illness? However, after living and understanding life, I understand now that the mind is a powerful thing. The mind, your mind will lie to you. It will tell you things like you are unworthy, you are unlovable, you are a horrible person. And the danger is that if you start to believe these things over a course of years, that could turn into a mental illness. Now, when it comes to the bottom one, external stigma, quoted by yours truly, because when I did looked up external stigma, there were all these different definitions, but for me, they all arguably fell into this one definition, which is external stigma is stigma that comes from anything outside of yourself. And that can be from the medical profession, from schools, people, places, or even things. Now, although both are damaging, I believe internalized stigma is much worse, because with external stigma, it only has the power that you give it, whereas internalized stigma, your thoughts, your emotions, and your feelings are with you all the time. Factor in HIV, and internalized stigma can be much, much worse. Next slide. Next slide. So for the purpose of time, we're going to keep it moving through some of the slides. Next slide here. So this is, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with your own internalized stigma? So according to Medical Monitoring Project, some of the ways that they list are, ask yourself the question, are these things that your mind is telling you, are they true? Are you a horrible person? Are you unlovable? Are you unworthy? Then you kind of find that those things really are traced back to a place of fear. Other things that you can do are find a counselor, join a support group, and then take your medications as prescribed. Research has shown that when people are negative, they cannot transmit HIV through sex. And doing this, your part, you know that you're doing what you can to keep you and, well, your partner safe. Next slide. There's still something missing, which is a conversation about spirituality. Now, when I say spirituality, I am not talking about religion, because there's a huge difference between spirituality and religion. Now, not that one is better than the other, but they both serve a purpose, but they're just different. For one, religion deals with what you believe, whereas spirituality deals with what you know. And that knowing comes from your experiences. Because once you experience something, you don't have to believe that it happened. You know, because you were there. You know what happened, who was there, what it felt like. So we won't get into it too deeply, but for now we'll talk about what spirituality is, how it's different than religion, how it can be used to combat trauma and stigma, how it can be used to improve your relationships with your friends, your family, and your sex partners. But most importantly, we'll talk about how spirituality can be used to help improve your relationship with yourself, which will ultimately improve all of your other relationships. Why? Well, because if it's easier for you to understand you and get along with you, it'll be easier for other folks to understand you and get along with you as well. So speaking about the differences, religion can be very rigid and often takes the view that there's only one way to see things, whereas spirituality is open to all things and says that there are many different roads to freedom. Now, the biggest flex for me is that spirituality can help keep you from making decisions from a part of yourself that needs to be healed. And you definitely don't want to make decisions from a part of yourself that is wounded. But it's what people do all the time, unknowingly. Not understanding that decisions made from a place of pain can only produce more pain. And that's because a seed can only bear fruit after its own kind. For example, you can't plant apple seeds and grow bananas. And in that same regard, you can't plant pain in your life and expect to grow joy. So spirituality can help you understand why you feel the way you feel, why you do the things you do, and where your emotions are coming from. And understanding yourself in this way can help keep you from making decisions that you might later regret. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's say, for instance, you have a husband who divorced his wife because he caught her cheating, and he was devastated. But he recovers. Some years later, he gets married again, and his new marriage is going along great, until his new wife has a schedule change. And now she's coming home late from work all of a sudden. Now, before he knows it, he finds himself at a place to where he is feeling doubtful and mistrustful about her reasons for coming home late all of a sudden. Now, with the emotional awareness, which is another tool we'll talk about in just a second, it can help him understand why he feels like he feels and where his emotions are coming from. He can process and say, you know what? The reason I'm having a hard time is because of what happened in my last marriage. My last wife cheated on me, I walked in on it, I was devastated, and I lost everything. And because of my new wife's schedule change, it's taking me right back to what happened before. Now, with understanding himself in this way, this can help keep him from chasing a thought down a rabbit hole and destroying his new relationship based on his past experiences. And so you see, the power in understanding yourself in this way is that you get to navigate your life with intention. And so instead of being a prisoner to circumstances that you created by acting on emotion, you get to move your life in a direction that you choose based on what you truly desire. Next slide. Next slide. So we're going to talk about unconditional love. So there are some framework that we need to talk about with it. The first is unconditional love. So when we talk about unconditional love, I think many people are thinking about the kind of love that you see on TV, you know, where people are running in slow motion, you know. Or when you think about unconditional love, people are thinking about a couple who's having a moment out in the rain after breakup, and one person says, oh my God, I'm so sorry I hurt you. Can you ever forgive me? Can you ever take me back? And the other person says, oh my God, I love you so much, of course I'll take you back. Or when people think about unconditional love, they think about the kind of love that can withstand anything: anger, jealousy, abuse, or even cruelty. But before you can get to this place like these two are, that are lit up in light, you have to have it healed all of your past wounds. Why? Well, because when a wound is disturbed, it hurts. And that will cause your body to react from a place of pain. And get this, without your consent. And from that moment on, whatever you do and whatever you say will be coming from a place of pain. Let me give you an example. Let's say, for instance, you broke your arm, and it's been pretty painful. You've been in the house and everything, and you've been babying it. At a point, you're like, you know what? I'm tired of being cooped up in this house. I'm going to call up some friends. I'm going to have some fun. So you call up some friends, and you set up a date to go out, and let's say, as you're getting dressed to go out, you know, you don't want to look injured. You want to look cute. And so you dress up in such a way that it's hard to tell that your arm is injured. So let's say now you're out with the friends, you're sitting at a table, you're chopping up. Maybe you're looking this way talking about Lisa. Lisa did what? Oh, man, I knew it was going to happen. I told her she shouldn't. You know how y'all do. So let's also say there's someone who doesn't know that their arm is injured, walks up and grabs their arm. Hey, Tom, what are you going to do? Ow! You might even hop up from the table with a few choice words. What the hell is wrong with you? What happened? Well, what happened was your body reacted from a place of pain without your consent. You didn't even know it was coming. You were looking the other way. Your brain didn't have time to process, but your body knew. And emotional pain is no different. If you are wounded emotionally and someone pokes your emotional wound, you're going to react from a place of pain without your consent. Only it may look differently in terms of you may shut down, become more withdrawn. Or you might lash out at somebody. You might say some things that are hurtful that you really don't mean. You might cuss somebody out. Hell, you might even kill somebody. And so what I've learned is that when you haven't healed emotionally, you can't respond authentically in any relationship because you can't hear what's being said to you without the filter of your wounds. Also, what I've learned is that when people haven't healed emotionally, they don't understand that before you can give love to someone else, you have to first give it to yourself and love yourself enough to do the work on healing the parts of you that are wounded. And once you understand that making decisions from a part of yourself that is wounded can only produce wounded experiences, now that gives you an opportunity to choose to make decisions from a place of wholeness instead, which is free from anger and fear and competition and separation and rage. Now you can make decisions from a place of peace and love and joy and wholeness and healing and happiness and reverence for life. And that, my dear friends, is authentic power, yet another tool we'll talk about in just a second. Next slide. Ooh, the slap that was heard around the world. If you're not familiar with this is a scene taken from the Oscars where Will Smith walks up on stage in front of the whole world and slaps Chris Rock across the face for saying something about his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, and then proceeds to march back to his seat and cuss him out. So let me first start by saying that Will Smith did not have authentic power at the Oscars, but this is a great example to show you what I mean. So what is authentic power? Well, simply put, authentic power is having dominion over your emotions. It's when you reach a place to where you're no longer making decisions from a part of yourself that needs to be healed. Now, don't get me wrong, having authentic power does not mean that you will no longer have strong emotions. It just means that you reach a place to where your emotions are no longer controlling the way that you behave. What having authentic power does mean is that having it will allow you to stand in the middle of your experiences and not be dragged by your emotions. Why? Well, because the part of you that is wounded is no longer running the show. So Will Smith's behavior for me at the Oscars is a great example of why having authentic power is so important. And that's because having it, like I mentioned, can help keep you from making decisions that you might later regret. And once you understand this, you get to choose to either react from a place of pain or respond from a place of wisdom. Next slide. Emotional awareness. This is one of my favorites. This comes from an author by the name of Gary Zukav. He writes in his book called The Heart of the Soul with his wife, Linda Francis. And in the book, they talk about emotional awareness as being like a garden. If you look, you see a lot going on, right? You see some textures and colors and heights. You see some reds and some yellows and some purples, lots of green. If you look over to one side, you'll notice that you'll see a walkway. You know, you can get to a place that you know this garden so well that you can say, you know what? Over by the back fence, there's a bird's nest. You can also know this garden so well that you can say, you know what? The rabbits come out in June. And if you look in the trees, you may see birds, and if you look in the grass, you may see bugs. And the premise is, you can get to a place that you know this garden so well that you'll never get lost in it. And with emotional awareness, with understanding yourself and why you feel like you feel, you'll never get lost in your emotions again either. And the power in that, at the very least, is that you can help others understand you because now you understand you. Next slide. Ooh, fear, the big gun. Now, when we talk about fear, or we talk about spiritual principles, fear is at the top of the list for many reasons. But for the purpose of what we're talking about today, we'll focus on the effects that fear has on the brain and on the body. You know, fear shows up for all of us in many different ways. It can be a fear of failure, a fear of success, a fear of falling, a fear of dying, a fear of losing a loved one, or maybe even a fear of getting sick ourselves. But although fear has many faces on many levels, fear feels the same for all of us. It can feel like this gnawing, gaping, something that we feel in the pit of our stomach. And no matter who you are, where you're from, how much money you make, or what you look like, we all experience fear. And the reason that fear feels the same is that fear activates. Can you hit that button for me one more time? Our fight or flight response. So one of the things that happens when our fight or flight response is activated is that we experience a significant change in the part of the brain that we have access to. Or one of the things that happens when our fight or flight response is activated is that our nervous system sounds an alarm. And so one of the most significant things that I want you guys to remember that happens when our fight or flight response is activated, like I mentioned, we experience that change in the brain, and it's a pretty important part. Now, I have a video to show you guys or so, but I don't want to show it right now because we don't have a time for it. But in the video, it talks about how once you are frightened or once your fight or flight response is activated, these things happen within our bodies that are out of our control. Next slide. Next one. One more time. So, remember how I mentioned that when our fight or flight response is activated that we experience a significant change in the part of the brain that we have access to? Yeah? So not only do we experience those physiological changes like an increase in heart rate and our pupils dilating and blood being rerouted to our extremities, hit the button for me. In his books, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself and Evolve Your Brain, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about the fact that even other strong emotions like anger and frustration and sadness and even loneliness can trigger our fight or flight response as well. Why? Well, because the body recognizes the feelings associated with these emotions as stress. And when the body feels stress, it releases chemistry that triggers fight or flight. And that stress can be the stress of breaking up with a partner, cramming for an exam, feeling sad or lonely, or just being worried about whether or not you're going to have a job tomorrow. Hit the button for me. See the orange part of the brain in this picture? That's called the prefrontal cortex, also called the frontal lobe. It's our executive brain. It's our thinking brain. It's our higher brain. It's the part of the brain that controls complex functions like problem solving, reasoning, self-control, and our intellect, just to name a few. But it's also the part of the brain that keeps you from doing things like laughing at a funeral, or yelling fire in the crowded movie theater, or cussing out your boss and storming out of their office and slamming the door when you know you need your job. But guess what? The thing is, that's the part of the brain that shuts down during fight or flight. And the volume on your instincts, your emotions, and your animal nature is turned up. That's why you might feel like you don't have control over some of the things that you do or say when you're angry or scared. Or why you might just completely clock out in other situations, because your higher brain is muted and your emotions are running the show. Think about Will Smith at the Oscars. So you might ask, so why would nature do that to us? Well, if you ever find yourself in a life and death situation, you don't need your intellect, you need your instinct. Because if you're cornered, your intellect might say something like, oh, that's a 6'9" man. He weighs 290 pounds. I'm only 4'2". I only weigh 120 pounds. There's no way I can defeat him. Whereas your animal might say, come on. Oh, suki, now come on. But the problem with that is that everyday life situations like being stuck in traffic, cramming for an exam, or feeling sad or lonely in most cases isn't life-threatening. But the body still recognizes the feelings associated with these emotions as stress and turns off your thinking brain and turns up the volume on your emotions. Now, this may be great in a life and death situation, but not so much in everyday life. Maybe like trying to kill a mosquito with a bazooka. I mean, yeah, you might kill the mosquito, but you're also going to destroy everything else that wasn't the target. So, to pull it all together for you, whenever you feel angry, scared, sad, or lonely, or any other stressful emotion, you lose your ability to think clearly, to form rational thoughts, to override your impulses, and to control your emotions. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Think about how that can affect your relationships. So if you're ever interested in referencing this information, you can find it in Dr. Joe Dispenza's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Chapter 5, and Evolve Your Brain, Chapters 8 through 11. So who is Dr. Joe Dispenza? Well, he is a New York Times bestselling author, a chiropractor, a researcher in the fields of epigenetics and quantum physics, and his postgraduate trainings in the fields of neuroplasticity, brain chemistry, brain function, and biology. Now, we've talked a lot about like your higher self and your lower self and your animal nature and your instinct, that it can be hard to figure out like which self or which you is the real you, which self is the real self. Next slide. Is it the self that shows up when you had a fight with your mate? Next slide. Or is it the self that shows up when life feels so light and fanciful and free and like time stands still? Next slide. Or is it the self that shows up to stoke your heat, your passion, and your fire? Next slide. Oh, y'all nasty. Is it the self that shows up when you feel angry, agitated, or annoyed? Next slide. Or is it the self that shows up that vows to be your authentic you no matter what? Next slide. And finally, is it the self that shows up that feels like you are more than a conqueror and like you can do all things? So I ask you once again, which self is the real self? Which you is the real you? The answer, all of them. They're all you. The challenge is to pull out all the unhealed parts of yourself and do the work on healing them, so there's only one you left inside this whole. And it's completely doable, but there's a challenge. Next slide. There's something standing between you and a life that you truly want to live, a life of peace and joy and wholeness and healing and happiness and reverence for life. What's that you say? Hit the button for me. Programs. So before you can begin the process of healing and trying to figure out which you is the real you, it's important to understand how programs within your subconscious mind actually control your life. And how once your conscious mind, aka your thinking mind, aka your prefrontal cortex that we talked about before, when your conscious mind is occupied, like in thought, then your subconscious mind is in the driver's seat of your life. Now, that may not sound too, well, that is so important, I'm going to say it again. When your conscious mind is occupied, like in thought, then your subconscious mind is in the driver's seat of your life. Now, that may not sound too scary until you realize that the subconscious mind is the place where your programs live. Now, no harm, no foul if your programs are positive, right? But if your programs are negative, then your subconscious mind becomes a place where your very own boogeyman lives. Because once you engage your programs with your belief, they begin to play out in your experiences automatically in one way or another. Let's say, for instance, you are someone who is living with HIV, and you consistently say and believe to yourself things like, people with HIV look sick, frail, unwell, and infected. And one day someone says something to you like, oh my God, you've lost weight, you look great. But because you have consistently engaged a message that says that people with HIV look unwell, what you hear is that you look sick. And because you have consistently engaged that message without challenging it, your body has learned your message so well that it has now become a program. So what is a program? Think about a computer program. A computer program is a set of instructions that a computer uses in order to carry out a task. Our programs are pretty much the same. Our programs are a set of instructions that our brain uses in order to carry out a task. How do we get these programs? Well, we get them in a lot of ways, but to keep it simple, one of the ways that we get them is because we learn them based on our consistent experience with them. And once you learn something so well consciously, it gets sent to live or get stored in your subconscious mind, which is where it becomes a program. So we have a video, but I'm not going to show the video again for the sake of time. But there is a Dr. Bruce Lipton in the clip taken from a Netflix, from a docu-series on Gaia, which is like a Netflix of spirituality, called Subconscious Programming. In the clip, Dr. Lipton will talk about the things that I just shared with you guys and then take you deeper down the rabbit hole as to what it all means if I shared that, if we were going to watch the clip. But I would say, in the clip, he talks about how our subconscious programs have so much power in shaping our lives. Next slide. So keep it right there for a second. So I would say that, do I want to move on to the next one? Well, when our subconscious mind is in the driver's seat of our life, it's producing experiences that are not in line with what you truly want for your life. But what if there's a way to turn it off? Or at least short-circuit it, so to speak? Well, according to Dr. Tara Swartz, a neuroscientist who specializes in psychiatry, there is presence. Next one. One more time. Dr. Tara Swartz is a, one more again. One more time. Dr. Tara Swartz is the medical doctor who studies the brain. She is a senior lecturer at MIT Sloan and a visiting senior lecturer at King's College of London. And so to talk about presence, I'm going to combine information taken from Dr. Tara Swartz's book, The Source, where she talks about the science of the brain, one more time, and Dr. Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, where he talks about how our emotions influence our biology, one more again. And so, but before we talk about presence, I want to talk a little bit more about epigenetics. Like I mentioned before, epigenetics is the science that shows us how our environment influences our biology. That's your external environment and your internal environment. And so what this means is that the things that we experience outwardly and inwardly, for that matter, affect us on a cellular level, down to the cells of your being. And since your environment influences you on a cellular level, then how you process what you're experiencing within that environment sends a message to your DNA. If that message is negative, it radiates throughout every cell in your entire body. If it is positive, it does the same. And what's incredible about that for me is that what this means then is that your thoughts become, well, you literally do become your experiences on a cellular level or chemically. Picture this. You walk in and you see your husband in bed with another woman. Kill him dead. You look closer and it's your best friend. You're gonna feel something, a lot of things. And one of those things might be anger. Your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty, your breathing is changed, and your mouth may be dry. On a cellular level, your organs are producing chemicals that are now floating in your blood. And these chemicals are messages about what's going on in your external environment. And so what had happened was your body has turned what you are experiencing in your external environment into chemistry so that your body can feel what your mind is witnessing. Wow. And whatever you are thinking also creates chemicals that are floating in your blood that are messages of what's going on in your internal world. And so what's absolutely mind-blowing about that for me is the realization that what this means then is that your thoughts literally do become flesh. How? Because your thoughts create chemicals, and those chemicals animate your flesh. And so I would say, yeah, next slide. Keep going. One more, there you go. This is the day that my spiritual journey began. This is the best day of my life and the worst day of my life, all in the span of about 25 minutes. I went from being collapsed on the floor in the hotel room at a conference in 2018 in front of a mirror to being thrilled that God had answered my prayers and sent me a mate to take away the loneliness I was feeling in my life at that particular period of time. As I'm standing there, that's me, the dark-skinned guy with my hand. As I'm standing there, I had just begun to learn how to release the internal stigma that came from believing the negative things that my mind was telling me about myself. And that internalized stigma had manifested as an idea that had dogged me for over 30 years. And the idea was that I was damaged goods. So as I'm standing there, I had begun to learn how to quiet the voices that were telling me that I was unworthy, that I looked like a monster, and that no one would ever love me because I was diseased. Next slide. Next slide. That was my breaking point. But there was also a crack in the shell of my own internalized stigma that started my journey toward wholeness and toward healing. Because no more than 15 minutes before I got in the hot tub in the picture you guys just saw, I was upstairs on my hands and knees, wailing in pain from what I felt like I saw in the mirror. And during that storm, I heard a voice that said to me, I'm tired of living like this. I'm done. I'm not living like this anymore. Get up. And so I did. Next slide. What I didn't realize was that this is what I saw when I looked in the mirror that day. It was abnormal, distorted, twisted. What I also didn't realize was that my own internalized stigma had created a very real condition called body dysmorphia. If you're not familiar, body dysmorphia is a mental health condition where a person can't stop thinking about one or more perceived flaws or defects in their appearance. Things that are so minor to other people may seem overwhelming to them, to the point where they avoid social situations, which I did for years. I mean, I showed up physically, but that was about it. And as I'm there on my hands and knees wailing, I am releasing 30 years worth of internalized stigma. And as I'm there wailing and purging and wailing and purging, the voices that were telling me that I was unworthy, that I looked like a monster, and that no one would ever love me, began to get more quiet and more quiet and more quiet until they were gone. At which time I was able to get up, I cleared my head, and I joined my coworkers in the hot tub downstairs. At which time, next slide, I met a man, y'all. I met a man. Oh my God, their relationship was everything. He was everything. The thing that you see in this picture, the vibe, it was all of that. But I don't have time to kind of go through all those things that I really want to do for this, but what I want to do to close this, I'm going to do an exercise with you guys called Who Am I? Next slide. Next slide. Yes. This comes from an old school rapper by the name of KRS-One. Some of you guys might be old enough to remember who he is. Wa-da-da-dang, wa-da-da-da-dang. Hey, listen to my 9mm go bang. Not promoting violence, gun violence, but that's just how the song goes. But on the count of 3, I want you guys to do this exercise with me that he did, and I think it's pretty powerful. So on 3, I want you guys to yell out, "Rock star!" But here's the catch. Don't say it out loud. Say it in your head. All right, 1, 2, in your head. 3. Beautiful. So did you guys say rock star? Did you guys hear yourself say rock star? Okay, I want you guys to ask yourselves a question. Whose voice was that? Whose voice was that you heard say rock star? I'm wrapping up. Right. You just said rock star without opening your mouth. Not only did you say rock star, but you heard yourself say rock star. How is that possible? How is it possible that you just heard yourself say something, but you didn't utter a word? If you pay close attention, you begin to understand what people mean when they say you are not your body. You spoke without opening your mouth. And you heard without using your ears. Who was it that spoke? And who was it that heard what you said? It wasn't your body, because your body didn't make a sound. And that voice you heard finally is the voice of your higher self. Some call it spirit. And your spirit doesn't feel anger and fear and competition and loneliness and rage. Why? Well, because your spirit is already whole. And guess what? At your core, so are you. So the next time you feel like your life is not moving in the direction that you think it should, ask yourself these questions. Am I living my life from a place of pain and from a place of fear? Or am I living my life from a place of wholeness and from a place of love for myself? Thank you. The beginning.
Thank you, Clarence. Always great to be around, feeling the energy, feeling your energy. Thank you. Jacqueline, can you do it? Okay. You can do it. Rockstar Jacqueline. I'd like to introduce you to Jacqueline Kendall Howe. She is one of our 2 nurse practitioners. Elizabeth, stand up. run our prep clinics in Southfield and Pontiac. And Jacqueline is going to go over Oakland County Health Division HIV resources. And you can always call us, and we'll give you more information. And she's gonna do it with her new little 1-month-old.
That's a tough act to follow, but I'm going to tell you about some of our amazing resources at our organization. So first off, we have 2 locations, one in Pontiac, one in Southfield. And our health departments offer HIV testing, STI services, hepatitis C testing and treatment. We also offer vaccines and other public health resources. We do have a partnership with a federally qualified health center that offers primary care as well as some family planning in both locations. Our HIV department, which Janet and Lisa and Liz run, offer partner services, which links newly diagnosed people living with HIV to medical care and other resources, housing, etc. And then also links up previously diagnosed individuals who have either fell out of care or recently moved to the area with those similar resources. We also offer testing and HIV and STI testing at Outreach, Affirmations, Oakland University, as well as some others. Our PrEP and NPEP programs are now celebrating, I think, their 6th year. 2019 we started it. It grew from a little and is now a lot. We offer PrEP and NPEP as well as hepatitis C testing and treatment at both our Southfield and Pontiac locations. We have a harm reduction service program that is housed physically in Pontiac, but also does mobile service unit that offers Narcan, syringe exchange, HIV testing, STI testing, and links up people to substance use programs and hepatitis C testing and treatment. And I think that's it, but did I miss anything? Did you cover All right, well, thank you guys.
Okay, as we move forward, does everyone have a candle? And Kathy, can you come up here with me? And if you don't have a candle, oh, they're all gone? Wow. Okay. Do you have one? Here, there's, what, can Kathy? No, take, okay. Kathy Jarris, this is Kathy Jarris. Darbison, who is a dear friend of mine. Kathy started just briefly tell them about Stitches so they can stop.
Okay, so if you didn't have a chance when you came in, there's a bunch of dolls that are out there in the foyer. Those dolls were made by girls and women who are living with HIV infection. Started the project in 1999, and it has grown and transformed, and we have dolls from other groups of women, women who suffer from bleeding disorders, women who have been victims of violence and sexual assault. We have some trans dolls even in some of the collections, and anyway, it has grown organically, really. So you can take a look at that when you go out and read some of the things that are there with the dolls. I think it would be great, and I'll be standing out there if you have any questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before we do the candlelight vigil, I want to read something that was sent to me by a man that my husband and I met about 4 months ago. We were at a restaurant in Detroit, and we all of a sudden at the end of dinner started talking this table of 2 men and a woman that live in Florida. And, you know, what do you do? Everything. And he wrote, we talked for a little while. This was about 4 or 5 months ago, and yesterday I get an email. It says, "Hello, Janet. Thinking of you and Mark as you prepare for World AIDS Day event tomorrow. Your work has been highlighted even more with the federal government choosing not to recognize the day for the first time since the 1980s. I can only imagine the impact of their purposeful decisions to negatively impact healthcare are having on your work. Very unbelievable. Once again, you and your team, my team, see my team? It's all over. They're all over. My direct team at the health department and the team that I work with in the community, friends, all the people here who are here today to support us. Once again, your team are the angels among us. Thank you. Jerry and I would be there tomorrow if we lived in Detroit, with deepest gratitude. And this is to all of you, and to think that how the work that we do touches people and what has happened in the last few days. And I'm going to start and read this letter, if you haven't heard it, from the CEO of the National AIDS Memorial. As the CEO of the National AIDS Memorial, I am outraged and completely disappointed by the U.S. government's decision to cancel this year's World AIDS Day related activities. This is not a neutral, bureaucratic choice. It is a cruel abdication of responsibility at a moment when people living with HIV and those at risk need recognition, solidarity, and action more than ever. For decades, World AIDS Day has served as a vital moment to honor the millions of lives lost, to stand for survivors, to promote prevention and treatment, and to demand justice and support for communities impacted by HIV. Canceling it sends a message that the pain, the loss, and the resilience for those so affected no longer matters. This message is intolerable. Make no mistake, every person living with HIV, every caregiver, every advocate, every researcher, and every community impacted by this disease demands to be seen. We refuse to be erased. We refuse to be silenced. With this cancellation, the U.S. government is not stepping back. It is stepping over the bodies of people already suffering. The gaps in funding, treatment, prevention, and compassion risk reversing decades of progress. We call on all civic leaders, local governments, communities, and individuals to reject this abandonment. On December 1st, and every day, we will mark World AIDS Day ourselves. We will light candles. We will tell the stories of lives lost and lives saved. And we will demand accountability. We will not let this government erase our history or our future. To every person living with HIV, to every person who has ever lost someone to HIV, to every caregiver and advocate, we see you, we honor you, we stand with you. This fight is far from over, and we will continue it with or without Washington's permission. Today, we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us and say, never again will we allow a community to be harmed by ignorance, stigma, and hate. As the AIDS movement has taught us again and again, it is the extraordinary power of community that has always sustained us in moments of crisis when uncertainty is high and division can feel overwhelming. It is a community that reminds us of who we are, what we value, and what we can overcome when we stand together. And using the words of ACT UP, we must continue together to stand up, fight back, and to never forget silence equals death. John B. Cunningham, CEO of the National AIDS Memorial.
Bless him.
Please stand. And Kathy?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Janet. Okay, so let us all carry the torch to a brighter tomorrow. This candlelight vigil honors those that we have lost and those who are living with this virus every day. They will not be forgotten. We will say their names and commit to making our society better, more accepting, and more loving. If you wish to say a name out loud or silently, please feel free to do so. Michael Jarris.
Chris Dufresne.
Dan Bozek. Louis Barrios. Dennis Berry.
Please be seated. And the choir?
They're coming up. Okay, I'll go down, okay?
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
Janet, tell them that we have baskets out there to collect these.
Oh, yeah. As the choir is coming up, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Because you know what? Dreams do come true, and my dream came true tonight. Thank you, everyone, for spending your evening with us to honor and remember those we have lost to HIV, to support those currently infected with HIV, and to commit ourselves to the prevention and hopeful cure for this disease. I invite you to spend some time in reflection and witness the love and stories of the 8 people who are on the quilt panel over there on the wall. There are 50,000 panels and nearly 110,000 names sewn into its panels. The quilt helps to ensure that the lives of people who died from AIDS are not forgotten, and the story of AIDS is known by future generations, so that never again will a community be harmed by the fear, the stigma, the discrimination, and the silence. Please visit Kathy's Stitches dolls out there. Read the stories that the women wrote. They dressed their dolls. They made their dolls. We asked them one question. If this doll could talk, what would she say? We have sandwiches. We have dessert. We have chips and pretzels and water for everyone to share. We don't have seats. Mike, is Mike Monty still in here? Mike, can they eat in the back right there? You can come and sit in the back right here in seats. So please come and share with that. Thank you, Dr. Cohn. Thank you, Clarence. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sing Out Detroit Choir, Ferndale First United Methodist Church, Bill Darbison, Mark Drouse, my colleagues, Liz, Lisa, Emerson, Jacqueline, Elizabeth, Stephanie. Am I missing anyone? Huh? Lena, Kate. Thank you for coming and being here tonight. Thank you to my daughter, my husband Mark, and all the behind-the-scenes people who made this event possible. From the bottom of my heart, I'm looking out here, and wow, thank you for being here tonight. We will have a closing prayer by the pastor here at the church. after the choir. Amy, thank you, in the choir. And I'd like to introduce Weatherly Burkhead Verhels, lead pastor here at First United Methodist Church of Ferndale. Thank you for having us here this year.
It is a blessing that we were here tonight, and the strength, the hope that we have kindled tonight, I pray will be a flame that will continue to grow and to brighten this world. Let us pray. God of many names, we ask your blessing tonight, that as we hold up our individual flames, as we speak the names that are in our hearts, in our minds, in our world, that you would continue to spread this light, that it may spread across our world. Send us out into the world to tell our stories, to lift up the names and the needs of this world, that we may live in hope, that we may live in love, that we may bring peace and justice to all of your children. These things we ask in your holy name. Amen.